So an interesting question I got the other day on Instagram was about insulin sensitivity. And they were asking me, at the end of a long diet or a long contest prep, isn't it true that you put on muscle preferentially to fat because you're so insulin sensitive from losing fat? And this is actually a pretty pervasive thought in the bodybuilding and fitness community, that you need to be a low enough body fat to gain muscle. Otherwise, if you get too high in body fat, your insulin sensitivity goes down and it's going to cause you to gain mostly fat. That's not supported by the research data. And you have to remember that insulin sensitivity, there's two kind of forms of insulin sensitivity. You have insulin sensitivity in muscle and you have insulin sensitivity in fat. Now, when you diet down, yes, you get more insulin sensitive in muscle. But if you're already resistance training, you're already exercising, your muscle is going to be pretty insulin sensitive to begin with. What you really see a big difference in is the insulin sensitivity of adipose tissue. So think about adipocytes or fat cells as sponges. When you have big adipocytes, when you're in your off season or you're bulking or whatever, or have more body fat, they're very insulin insensitive. And so it's hard to get them to actually store more fat in fat because they're insensitive. Decreased insulin sensitivity in adipose tissue doesn't mean you store more body fat. If anything, it's the opposite. So that's like a wet sponge, right? It's saturated with fluid. If there's water on the counter and you take a wet sponge and try to wipe up the water, what happens? Nothing. It just stays there. It's insensitive. Now, if you take that sponge and you wring it all the way out, right? What happens? It's dry. You go to wipe up that same bit of water, wipes right up because it's very sensitive. I'm generalizing, but adipose kind of works the same way. As those fat cells shrink, and that's how we typically lose body fat. We don't destroy fat cells, they just shrink or expand for the most part. As they shrink, they become more and more and more insulin sensitive. So your muscle is already pretty insulin sensitive. If you're resistance training, if you're exercising regularly, you're not sedentary, your muscle is going to be pretty insulin sensitive. Adipose is what gets drastically more insulin sensitive as you start to lose a lot of body fat. So when you get to the end of a long contest prep, or you get to the end of a really long diet where you've gotten to very low body fat, you're not primed for muscle gain. You're primed for fat gain. And the research studies show that. The research studies show that lean people who regain body weight preferentially regain body fat first relative to lean body mass. And that even goes for people who rapidly regain it. So if you rapidly regain it, it doesn't seem to really increase the rate at which you regain your lean body mass. So what I suggest for people is, don't stay at a really low body fat forever. That can be unhealthy. Take controlled increases in calories so that your lean body mass has time to build back up, your metabolic rate has time to build back up, and you're not just throwing a bunch of calories at very insulin sensitive, dry, wrung out adipose tissue that's ready to gobble it right up. So again, this is a big myth that is pervasive amongst the bodybuilding community. I'm not sure how it came about. I think, if I had to guess, it's probably bodybuilders who are at the end of a long contest preparation who want an excuse to eat a crap load of calories, possibly binge eat, and not feel bad about it. So they kind of created this narrative in their mind that, I'm not gaining a bunch of fat, it's all going to muscle because insulin sensitivity. No, it's actually preferentially going to body fat. And that's okay, because part of getting back to normal, or not being so depleted and feeling like crap all the time, is regaining some body fat. So that's okay, but we just want to regain it in a controlled manner so we're not regaining excessive amounts of body fat. But the idea that you are insulin sensitive in muscle at the end of a long cut, and that way you can just eat a bunch because you're going to gain a bunch of muscle and you're primed for anabolic rebound. No, you are primed for anabolic rebound in fat tissue. And further to that point, you can gain muscle as somebody with a lot of body fat. This idea that you can't gain muscle because you're insulin insensitive If you just resistance train, you will become more insulin sensitive in muscle. And your adipose, because you're overweight or obese, your adipose will remain insulin insensitive. So actually the opposite is true. If you have more body fat, it's actually probably easier for you to add muscle. Now the problem becomes, I don't want you guys to use this as an excuse to go into fulking mode, which is just eat whatever the hell you want. The problem is, if you gain enough adipose, you gain enough body fat, when you try to strip it down, you end up losing lean body mass. My recommendation, especially for bodybuilders in the off season, is to get to a comfortable level of body fat that is somewhere around your body fat set or settling point, and try to do your gaining phase from there. And that will probably be the most effective in terms of being able to build muscle without putting on excessive body fat.